And now, for wonderful words that we always have our ears perked for whenever any of our brothers or sisters come up here to tell their story. We have one of those days today. I would like to invite our first speaker, Jane Harper, to enlighten us about herself.
Thank you. So I have to take down the Char box down here. So, I am a dangerous woman. That was the last time I was up on this at this podium. I got to play Jane Austen and say those words, but it is wonderful to be here with you this morning to talk about my journey here to this UU. You know, for as long as Christy and I have been together as a couple, which is almost 8 years, we've been coming to this UU meeting house. And before making this our permanent home, you know, we had a house in California, and for many years we came back and forth, and we were considered friends of the meeting house. And we would come to our little house on the west end of Provincetown. But 3 years ago, we made this our permanent home and a place that we can call home here at the UU. As a visitor and now as members, this has been a place for me to find acceptance, community, and seekers of the truth. These are the 3 words that came up for me when I began to look inside to answer the question, why am I a UU? Acceptance, community, and truth. But before I go there, I thought it might be appropriate to share a bit about my spiritual journey and the path that led me here to Provincetown and to making this place home to my spiritual family. I was born and raised in a little town in upstate New York, western New York, actually south of Buffalo, called, ironically, Eden, New York, like the Garden of Eden. My parents brought up my 2 older brothers and my sister and I in a very strict Catholic household, complete with all the traditions of the day, like saying the rosary together and wearing hats and white gloves to church on Sunday, back in the early days anyway. And all the rituals and sacraments of communion and confession and confirmation, 8 years of parochial school with the nuns, secret sisters of the, Immaculate Conception, or I don't remember, but I had all nuns for my teachers. And my personal favorite was no meat on Fridays, which is still a tradition in our family. I drag Christy on Fridays to Fanesi's for a fish fry almost every week. And it is a fish fry, not fried fish. That's a Buffalo tradition. Well, so while my parents were very devout in their practice of Catholicism, none of their children followed that path. In fact, we've been, most of us, in resistance to that path through the years. Up until when we were 18, we had to go to, church every Sunday. But while I never really found a personal connection with this path to the divine, I did learn some very valuable lessons along the way, and truths. Things like the golden rule, loving your neighbor as yourself, being in service to others, and most of all, having faith, even in the most difficult of times. Faith that something greater is operating and guiding our way. Faith that guided my parents through a very difficult time in their lives. But their faith was in Jesus and Mary and the Catholic saints and a God that was out there in heaven. And that faith, though, was something that was very needed. It carried them through the devastating agony when my oldest brother Dick, committed suicide in 1991. It also has carried my dad through these last 6 years when he lost his bride of over 60 years. And I'm sure their faith was operating when one of their children, my oldest brother Don, moved to Asia when he was at a very young age and never came back. He did come back to visit, but he moved very far away. When 3 of their children experienced divorce, and when I came out as a lesbian at the age of 17. For me, the symbolism of Catholicism never really touched my heart or my soul, but the idea of faith in something greater did. For many years, I wondered if I would find a spiritual path that resonated with me. And while it took me almost 50 years to find it, I did have faith along the way. Those early lessons in the Golden Rule and faith are what must have carried me through most of my 20s and 30s when I had no spiritual life to speak of. But I was all about building my career at IBM and raising my son, Max. And not knowing any different way, I enrolled my son Max in Catholic Sunday school, and he went through the sacraments as I did, and you know, his grandparents were really happy, and we kind of felt like we were off the hook. But it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I began to feel a call to experience some kind of relationship with the divine. I lived in an old converted barn in those years when I was in my 40s, and across the street, diagonally across the street, was this big white Methodist church. It was looked very much like the UU. It had a big steeple on top, and it was a white wooden building. And the church bells would ring on Sunday, and I wondered if I would ever feel compelled to, wander in. Finally, one day, my former partner and I were drawn in, and for the next couple of years, I experienced my first connection with the divine. It was a reverence I had never felt before, and a relationship that I really longed to explore. While I had absolutely no tolerance for the dogma of the Methodist Church, I did love our pastor, who was a former NYPD police sergeant, and he had such great stories, and he would speak every week with clarity, and he opened my eyes about this idea of building a relationship with God. Still, that God was a God that was outside of myself, and yet this was a stepping stone for me. It wasn't until a devastating breakup of my long-term relationship that I felt hurled into a search for something much more. While I struggled to understand why my life had been turned upside down, I grew hungry to search for truth and meaning in my life. That search led me to first Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra and Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh and many of the other authors and spiritual teachers and authors that you will find down on the spirit shelf. And yes, this is a shameless plug for you to go visit the spirit shelf. In fact, we have 4 new books there today, so please pay us a visit. But I truly believe that life throws you one of these curveballs when we are longing for a higher awareness of the truth, of our truth. After a gut-wrenching loss, I slowly began to open up to the idea that there was so much more for me to learn about myself, about the universe, and about the divine within. Lucky for me that when I opened up to this new idea, I became open to a new love in my life. Almost 8 years ago, Christy and I began our journey together, and I'm so blessed to be married. I didn't think this would happen. Thank you. So blessed to be married to this beautiful woman who fills my life with joy and is one of my greatest spiritual teachers. We love to learn and grow together, and it is such a joy for me to share this path with her. As we seek the truth with love, we practice yoga and meditation together. We often read spiritual books to one another. We travel to spiritual places. It's a beautiful thing. Which leads me back to those 3 words that I began with: acceptance, community, and truth. I am a UU because when you walk through these doors, you are accepted just as you are. And isn't that what we all want, after all? I know that I longed for it from my parents when I came out at that young age of 17. And I know that my children want it, our friends want it. Everyone longs to be accepted in whatever way we show up. And that is what I have found here in this sacred place. just like we heard in that song today. How can anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? You're accepted here. Community. I am a UU because of the wonderful community we have here. A community that helps one another, a community that reaches out to the greater community in which we live, a community that is there for us in our times of sorrow, in our times of greatest joy and celebration, and a community that has a lot of fun together. And we did have a lot of fun on New Year's Eve, I gotta say that. It was a lot of fun at that dance. And finally, truth. I am a UU because we affirm each and every week that we are here to seek the truth with love and to help one another. The words acceptance, community, and truth begin with the letters A, C, and T. ACT. I am a UU because not only do we accept one another as we are, and we have a great community of truth seekers, but because we are willing to act in times of need, for an individual in need, for a family that's in need of help, for our community, and for social action when it's called for. We will be out there on Valentine's Day together for the women. It is a great privilege and an honor to be a member of this UU Meeting House. And I thank you today for giving me the opportunity to share my story. Thank you. And thank you. And now it is my great honor and privilege to introduce our next speaker, Tom Cummiskey. Tom.
Thank you, Jane. And I've got you beat. I've got 12 years parochial school plus 4 years at a Jesuit university. Good Lord. All right, you're going to hear why I am a friend of the UUMH of Provincetown. Being a September arrival to these shores, I'm one of those whose future destiny is tied to a little bit of divine intervention, universal energy, and the right mojo and networking that will co-create for this single gay man, interfaith minister, librarian, human service professional, and newly turned 50-year-old, the opportunities to remain in this beautiful part of the Cape. I'm not a usual joiner. This freaks me out. I gave up on Sunday church going years ago. I've spent too many a Sunday morning hoping that the one I love will wake up and realize the full treasure that I am, that we all are. I'm not mainstream anything, yet I'm not a true radical either. When I moved to Provincetown, I had no idea I'd become a friend of the UU. I was simply playing piano, or trying to play piano, for the fabulous production of Most Dangerous Women. Synchronicity brought me to meet Diana Marr, and I figured, why not show up on a few Sundays? It couldn't hurt. What brings me back is a sense of community, a sense of belonging, as Jane referred to. It's not the building per se or the refreshments afterward. Rather, it's the feeling I get when I leave here. I'm a little less alone in this bit of land, a little less isolated from my fellow citizens. We come to a meeting rather than a church service. I kind of like that. Meeting implies that we all have something to contribute, not just a select few. I do take comfort in knowing there's a higher power, God, goddess, creator in my life, so that I don't have to be in charge of everything. Being in charge can weigh one down with undue anxiety, angst, and excessive medical bills. The God of my understanding, or higher power, is fluid, never judging, and allows space for all to unfold. When I arrived just 5 months ago, I was part of an independent, lay monastic community inspired by the simple life of St. Francis of Assisi. I just returned from that sacred and magical place in Italy where I pilgrimed in my own little way. Since walking away from that community this past December, I've been painfully rediscovering who I am, who Tom is, as a spiritual being having a human experience in Cape Cod. I'm a traveler among you, a contemplative of sorts, a modern lay monastic, if you will. I'm here to be close to the water again, having lived 3 years in the middle of North Carolina and missing so much the sea air. Who knew that walks through beach forest could feel like the best of both worlds, sea and forest? I'm here too for the community of tolerance and acceptance and the many kind-hearted and compassionate people I've met here. Coming here and partaking in small ways is part of this discovery process. I like the phrase used by the UCC, God is not done speaking, as it applies to my life at this very moment. I'm still listening and listening and listening on most days. But when I'm feeling like a ship without a rudder, I know that I can come to this space and metaphorically push the restart button on my spiritual discernment process. Thank you for holding space for me in this space, this meeting house where we dare to embrace sacred moments in the little ways of loving, serving, and remembering. Because beyond labels of religion, that's what it's all about for me, loving, serving, and remembering. There are many pointers in my life, as Eckhart Tolle says in The Power of Now, wisdom teachings from Buddha to Ramakrishna, Hildegard von Bingen, St. Francis, Chief Seattle, Dorothy Day, all inform and inspire my life. So being a friend of this place seems rather fitting right now. Since the footwork is well underway and the good vibes are flowing towards making this 8-month experiment more permanent, dare I say the H word, home, I'll be here among you all, growing, discerning, lighting candles, sharing our journeys, and simply being for each other. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. It takes some soul searching to put a little synopsis together as to why we bring ourselves here. So before we sing our last hymn together, take a little second or three to think about why your brain told your feet to walk through these doors today.